What do you say is the reason why they would go to your platform as opposed to, say, Airbnb?
These are professionals who come from some of the most recognized companies in the world. What happened over time was you began to hear horror stories, and investors get unbelievable returns on their investment. You don't really know if you can trust any of the people who are in your network.
I just want to understand how it even came about. Now, what you're saying is, if I put it on Airbnb, I don't have enough information about the guests.
That's why, you have companies like Matcha who are now coming back to the original mission. I'll tell you one thing that is part of the inspiration to do things differently, and I'll tell you one thing that I learned from them.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Hospitality Edge podcast, the podcast where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. Today, I'm very excited to have Noah Itovich. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Noah. He's basically the co-founder of Matcha.ooo, a marketplace that's aiming to essentially help professionals rent out their properties to trusted individuals. Very excited to have you on, Noah. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sebastian.
Yeah, absolutely. So Noah, tell us a little bit more about yourself. I mean, first of all, how do you even get into the startup game? What's your background, and where did the idea of Matcha.ooo came about?
Yeah, dude. I mean, so it's been a trip. I'm a lawyer by trade, master's in finance. Early in my career, I really thought that my future was to be a partner at a corporate law firm doing mergers and acquisitions. Coming into the world of law, it's obviously a highly recognized profession. Clearly, there's a lot of opportunity there. People are very successful and they make great careers for themselves. But it wasn't the type of thing that I had really taken the time to contemplate before I had gotten into that game. And so I was just sort of wading along what I like to call the path of least resistance, right? What happened is that I was at Davies Ward Phillips and Weinberg in their mergers and acquisitions practice and recognized that, I didn't have much of a background in business. I didn't understand the financial motivations that were driving our clients to do the transactions that we were assisting them with. And so I decided to do a master's in finance just to better understand that side of the world. When I was there, I was part of DCM. It was at McGill University. I was part of DCM, which is a fund where we manage some money on behalf of alumni of the program. And while I was there, I was covering the software sector and just began to go down the rabbit hole of software, entrepreneurship. I began to learn about markets, value creation, all these amazing things that, attract people like ourselves to the world of, the commercial world of business and entrepreneurship. And I absolutely fell in love with it. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. I was never the type of guy who would be reading case law on the weekend. I did have friends who would, but, here I would just go start reading about the Peter Thiels and the Steve Jobses of the world. And it was absolutely captivated and inspired by it. And just knew this was the sort of path that I wanted to take with my life. Wrote the bar, did my stage, learned a ton in terms of soft skills, how to actually be a professional, how to make commitments, and go above and beyond for our clients, skills that serve me to this day. I'm very grateful for the experience that I have in the legal world. But as soon as that was done, as soon as I became a member of the Quebec Bar, I immediately moved into the world of startups, joined the Series A startup doing back office automation called Abstract Ops. It was an unbelievable experience. I really got my hands dirty in the world of building, really felt the amount of impact and needle moving that even someone as junior as myself was able to bring to the table from an early stage. And then once I really got comfortable there, once I really got high on the drug of building, I said, okay, let me give this my own shot. Was part of the founding of a procurement platform for cybersecurity lawyers to bring in third-party service providers on data breaches that they were overseeing. Had some big wins there. We sold to some of the top law firms in the world, sold to some incredible data breach vendors, including Telus, who was on our platform. So I learned how to market, how to sell, how to create a vision, and some huge wins there. And now today I'm working on Matcha, which is also something that we're unbelievably excited about. It's a very, very exciting space. Actually, let me just stop and give a little bit of context on the world that Matcha is operating in, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, for sure. And right before you get there, I just want to understand how it even came about. So you worked with a startup Then I understand you were part of the founding team for another company. And then when does, like, if we put it on a timeline, when does the idea or the concept of matcha even comes to play? And yes, tell us a little bit more about it and what the vision for it is at this point.
Yeah, totally. So Matcha is a home rentals platform for professionals. Now, a little bit of context and why that's a necessary construct to exist in the world. We live in a world today where there's more opportunity than ever to travel for extended periods of time to see the world and like experience everything that it has to offer. You have tailwinds such as, remote work, increased flexibility, even at more like enterprise scale organizations to potentially travel for a month at a time or so. But the issue is that people are often restricted by their rental expense, right? As you know, someone who travels a lot yourself, it's tough to go away for extended periods of time and basically just have that expense being flushed down the toilet while you're also spending on your travels, right? Now, the solutions on the market today to be able to find someone who you can offload that expense to while you're gone aren't really cutting it for people, right? You look at companies like platforms like Airbnb, and the amount of information that you have on the types of people who you're going to be letting into what are your most private, intimate spaces is very limited, right? Like Airbnb will give you a star rating system. I don't know much from the star rating system, right? Maybe I went away with my fiance one weekend and for a spa retreat or whatever, maybe at most we drank a little bit of champagne. I'm going to be on my best behavior when I'm there. I'm going to get 5 stars. The next weekend when I go on the bachelor party with all my boys might not be the same type of behavior that you're expecting, right? And so that star system doesn't give me enough information on people. But to your question about how we came up with the idea for Matcha, what we learned, and we learned this through personal experience, is that at some of the most recognized companies in the world, I'm talking places like BCG, Microsoft, Palantir, Google, they have internal communications channels where people who are traveling for extended periods of time will basically spam their entire company with a message saying, hey, I'm going away for a couple of weeks. Here's my place. Does anyone want to stay here? Does anyone know someone who would want to stay here? Because naturally, you trust the judgment of your colleagues, right? And so if they're going to refer someone, that will also do it for you. My brother was staying in New York for 3 months at one point, and the way that he found his place was through a referral through the BCG communications channel for this type of thing. And so what we recognized is that there's a prevalent understanding in the market that the things that make great employees make great tenants too. If you can get through the recruitment process for one of these organizations, if you are conscientious enough to stick around and do good work, make your commitments as they come up, most likely you're the type of person who you can trust in your home while you're traveling as well. So what we've built at Matcha is a platform that allows people to tap into that trust and credibility that exists based on someone's place of employment. We validate tenants that actually work at the places where they say they do based on their corporate email addresses, and then give them access to exclusive listings available only for people at those particular organizations, such that when people travel for extended periods of time, they can find people who meet the criteria that they have in mind for the types of people that they want to allow into their homes.
Interesting. Wow, you explained that so well. I mean, that is very, very interesting. Now I'm curious, just in trying to understand the problem. So I understand what you're saying. So let's say I'm based in Montreal. I need to travel somewhere. I don't want, to still have to pay for my rent while I'm traveling. Now what you're saying is if I put it on Airbnb, I don't have enough information about the guests because it's all centered around the review system, the star system that they've built. I hear that. So what you're saying is let's attract people that this kind of a professional is going to be more interested in hosting. Now, what I want to understand there is you said your thesis is if someone is a good employee and works at a good company, he's probably going to make for a good tenant, right? So what is the thinking behind who that person would be that would be using the platform to stay at one of these properties? Is that an employee? Because if it's an employee that is also based in Montreal, then it wouldn't make any sense, right? The other employee based in Montreal has their property that they lease where they live permanently. So it's more of a like exchange situation where maybe this person works in the same type of company or industry or whatever. It's a good professional, and they're just going to come and visit Montreal while I go and visit another country. So they're going to take the opportunity to come and visit Montreal and stay in this vetted property. Is that it?
That's exactly it. And so like this notion of like finding people who you can trust for your places to stay in your place for this type of travel, it's
Mm-hmm.
particularly well suited to the corporate setting because the brands of these companies, right, transcend borders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Google in Montreal, even though if I work at Google in Montreal, or even if I don't work at Google in Montreal, I know if I know Google, if I
Mm-hmm.
live in Montreal, I know that that Google brand carries the same weight in Paris, let's say, right? And so without
Mm-hmm.
needing to actually ever have met these people, because of what I understand about the types of people who they're recruiting, I can put the trust in them. I can offload the burden, so to speak, of needing to do the vetting to this organization. Now, some of our competitors in the space are looking for other ways to tap into that trust. For instance, using your social network, right? Like, where are
Mm-hmm.
your friends? The problem with that is, to your point about geographical constraints, your friends typically live where you do. So there's
Mm-hmm.
not as much opportunity for that type of exchange. That's why we see so
Mm-hmm.
much potential in being able to leverage the corporate identity, your place of employment, to be able to facilitate this type of. It's not direct exchange, of course, right? But broadly speaking, this type of exchange.
Okay, makes sense. So
Yeah.
let's say so I see the value for me as the person that has a property, and now I can trust Matcha.ooo to say they're gonna find the best tenants out there, the best tenants out there, because they're getting people that work at these companies that are brands that I trust. So I get it. So that's on the host, on the host side of things, on the supply side of things. Now let's go to the demand side of things. Why would the person that is now looking to come to Montreal, what do you say is the reason why they would go to your platform as opposed to going to, say, Airbnb? What would you say is the differentiator that you're trying to aim for there?
Yeah, dude, that's a great question, and I'm happy. So it actually harkens back to our founding story, right? So when my brother was in New York, and he was able to get a place through a referral from the BCG channel. The place that he got was in Soho, central, spacious,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, and at a price that would make your eyes pop out. And the reason is back to the point of like supply and demand that you were sort of alluding to before. When you as a supplier constrain the amount of demand that's going to have access to your place, naturally you're going to have to accept a lesser price. And
Mm-hmm.
we've spoken to countless people, countless users from these organizations. And the point comes up over and over again. If I can get control over the type of person who I'm allowing into my home, I will accept a lower price, right? Oftentimes, given the alternatives on the market, people don't list at all. And so they basically just accept the rent as a sunk cost, right? So if we're able to give you someone who you really trust, high reliability, conscientious, all the things that you come to expect from someone at one of these organizations, then you're going to accept a lesser price. And so what we're able to offer on the tenant side is top accommodations located in the places where people who are like you actually want to live at top prices.
Interesting. Yeah. So basically, because the host has the value of getting better better tenants, so to speak, better guests, then they're also more comfortable charging less because they attribute a value to the quality of the person that's going to be staying there, and so that benefit is passed on to the end consumer. That makes sense. Now, the interesting question with this kind of marketplace model is
Yeah.
always, what comes first, the
Wow.
chicken or the egg. Should you get, of course, you need to start with some inventory, otherwise there's nothing you can do. But how have you guys tackled that dilemma of where to focus on first? Tell us a little bit about those first months, where you first launched. What has been the go to market strategy, so to speak, in the launching stages?
Totally. I mean, so it's actually, our focus has actually been counterintuitively on the demand side of the equation. I think there's a commonplace recognition that the standard way to bootstrap a marketplace is to bring demand, so to bring supply, have great
Hmm.
supply, and then demand will follow, right?
Hmm.
The way that we see it is that in our context, because the core value proposition for even having these places to entertain in the first place is a high quality tenant, the tenants are really what drives our marketplace. If you bring them to this central place, then the supply will follow, and it's novel supply, which isn't even necessarily on the market today. So that's really been our focus today.
Hmm.
Create that sort of awareness among our ICP around the consumers who are really a fit for what it is that we're building. Meet them at
Hmm.
the places where they're at,
Hmm.
and then the supply will follow them in. But I mean, this is really a matter of focus, right? Like that's not to say that like we're not doing any of the supply side. We
Right, right, right.
spend our time on both. It's just strategically we're more focused on demand. I'd say in terms of labor, it's probably like a 60-40. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting. That's very
Yeah.
interesting. Now
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about. Okay, so you said that it started with your brother's experience,
Yeah.
renting a place in New York through the network of people at his work or whatnot. Then
Yeah.
how if you go back to trying to understand the timeline of, how do you go from, okay, there's this thing we could do, to, hey, you know what, let's actually go ahead and do it. And then you were also working at this other company. Like, tell me how it went from just an idea, just a spark of a thought, to like something that started becoming more serious. And eventually, I mean, you guys are now doing this full time, aren't you? So tell us about the timeline of how this idea progressed into something that you guys started to see as something that you could do for real, seriously, and really dedicate yourself to it.
Totally. I mean, so philosophically, I'm a big believer that if you want to achieve something, anything, then you need to just start. And the reason for that is that like you need feedback from the market, right? Like you need to sort of in whatever way possible be rigorous about getting whatever validation that you can possibly get early on. Well, is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Will people use it? Are they willing to pay for it? Constantly raising the bar on yourself, right? And
Hmm.
in order to actually get that validation, you need to just start. And so what we did was very simply put, just began to spin up a landing page, a social media presence, begin to post. Once you have that sort of background that you like exist in the world, begin reaching out to people, like have
Hmm.
conversations. They have something that they can now refer back to, like, oh, this is something real that exists. Begin to treat it as something that's real in their minds
So
to
you were
provide.
still working. You were still working at the startup. You still had another full time occupation, and
Yeah,
when you started doing this on the side, is that kind of how
just
it
on the
started?
side. Exactly. Just putting it out there and beginning to gather that feedback, right? Like, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you have this idea and you just sort of go like Hail Mary at like just like a kernel of an insight, right? And I'll tell you, like, our insight, our vision of the space has evolved so much since we first got into it that like it would
Hmm.
be foolish to take such a massive bet on something that, is like totally unproven. So it was just a matter of sort of starting, just like beginning to make it something that exists in the world and then gradually investing more and more time as those types of, increased bets became warranted by what we were learning.
Interesting. And tell me
Yeah.
more about the founding team. So I know it was partly
Yeah.
you, your brother. So nice mix of skill sets and backgrounds there. You with the law background, business background, finance background, growth oriented and whatnot, and then your brother being more technical. If I remember correctly, tell us more about the
Yeah.
founding team and how you guys decided to structure that initial collaboration between you guys.
Yeah. I mean, dude, so we have a kick-ass team at Matcha. It's like, honestly, we're very fortunate to have such like both capable but also complementary like set of like contributors at such an early stage of our company. Now, I guess I kind of cheated because two of them are my brothers, right? So I didn't really have to do anything.
Okay, two of them. Got it.
Great gifts that my parents gave me was two co-founders, right? And so
That's
we have,
awesome.
yeah, so we have Ethan, who you just mentioned. He's really like, he's a top-notch coder, has plenty of experience. He's started a couple of startups, a couple of good successes. One was acquired. One was at the peak of the crypto boom. They were actually the most traded NFT on the Solana network.
Wow.
Yeah. He's my brother Ethan is the type of person who can really look at a situation, identify the structure of the problem, and then with the simplest amount of inputs, essentially, build something that emerges to be very complex, but like built out of like very simple components. So he's always had a knack for that type of reasoning. And it's a very good type of skill set to have, when you're building a platform from the ground up. So that's Ethan. Another one of our co-founders is David. So David is also a coder, but more of like a hacker type of bent. He's a CJEP dropout, serial entrepreneur. He was part of the team that brought one of the first teams to bring vapes to Canada.
Okay.
He's the CTO of a grow up. He built their ERP from the ground up. He was a co-founder of my brothers on the NFT project. He's the type of guy who's super resourceful, right? He's not academic, right? So he really looks at things from a pragmatic standpoint. What do we actually need to get this thing to market? How are we going to get people to use it? Like always sort of just looking at problems from like the simplest dimensions, the most pragmatic dimensions. And he's the type of guy, he's unbelievably proficient at just getting things done.
Wow.
We have another one of my brothers, Ari, also a coder. He's currently a
Wait a
student.
minute. Wait a minute. So it's
Yeah.
four brothers in total.
5 co-founders, 3 brothers. We do have one other brother. He's not part of the project. He's only 13, so he wouldn't have much to contribute, but he's a good kid. 3 brothers.
Man, he came too late to the world. He
Yeah, he
missed
came
out.
a part of,
Next one.
but
Okay, so you guys are five co-founders.
5 co-founders. So yeah, so you got Ari. Ari's also a coder. He's a student at McGill University. He's only 19 years old, but very impressive for his age. He's actually the CTO also of, like previously, he was the CTO of Every Jewels, which is a e-commerce like jewelry company, very, very like recognized in Canada. They've worked with a bunch of influencers and do like an incredible volume of business. And he actually started in their warehouse, just sort of packing boxes for them. And he started like talking to the leadership team. He's like, hey, like, like if we write this kind of script, so we can have this type of efficiency, orient people around the warehouse more efficiently, reduce duplication, blah, 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 this and that, until he eventually evolved into the role of their CTO. So also like very, just like a great problem solver, very pragmatic, very effective, and also has the benefit of having been able to learn from Ethan for his entire life about coding. And then the last member of our founding team is Fody, Jonathan Fody, but we call him Fody. He's sort of like the Swiss Army knife of the team. He actually came in with a limited background in coding. He has like a large variety of interests. He's studying electrical engineering. He's worked in biomedical. He's done some work in telecom. Like he's been all over the map. He's also just like a very energetic, charismatic, like just like, pedal to the metal type of dude. And so he's done some work for like go to market with us. But, the way he actually joined our team was like we were all hanging out, like drinking some beers, doing coding, whatever, like getting the thing built out. And he went to my brother. He's like, like maybe I could help out with this. Like, give me a task, give me something to do. He didn't have like that much background in coding when he first got involved, and like, just quickly, like picked things up, like was pushing to product, like really just like, you give the guy a task and he can like figure out just some like from first principles, basically like how to like contribute. And then like, given his like the level of energy and enthusiasm he brings, there's a lot of great work on go to market, talking to customers, that type of thing. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, like we have like, what's cool about our team is we have like an interesting mix of backgrounds and personalities, and it really meshes in like really like surprising, like delightful way for us, because like we've been able to make a ton of progress in a very short period of time.
How long have you guys been officially in business for? Like when did you guys launch officially?
So we really like went down like pedal to the metal building this thing out, I'd say mid September. I think we've
Okay,
been on the market as of like mid October.
got it.
So I guess at this point,
You've
yeah,
gotten a
or even,
you've gotten good traction already, no? Tell me a little bit more about, how many users you guys have already, how many listings and whatnot.
yeah, totally. So I mean, we have 250 users today. We have, and these are professionals who come from some of the most recognized companies in the world. We have an Uber network, a Microsoft network, an Amazon network. 25% of our users come from BCG, which is obviously has been a very important company in our development from the genesis of the actual idea to the point where we're at today. We have listings in Istanbul, Amsterdam, in Paris, Manhattan, Montreal, Toronto. And so it's
Wow.
a very, like, in terms of early signals, like the demand is clearly there, right? And like for obvious reasons, like, you go to some of the most high achieving professionals in the world and you tell them that people want to reward them for the level of responsibility and commitment that they've demonstrated by giving them access to their own homes, getting access to like really authentic travel experiences. That's super compelling, like on the tenant side. On the
Hmm.
host side, to be able to tell people that they're going to be able to access some of the most desirable tenants in the world is also something that's super compelling. So, we've had plenty of inbound outreach, people like reaching out to us and just telling us, like, this is amazing. Like, I want this. Like, I need to have, I'm going away for a couple of months. Like, I want people from your platform to stay at my place. Is, beyond any of the metrics or the signals that we receive, the most powerful thing that like tells us that we have something that's worth building. Um, and now
That's
it's just a
interesting.
matter of actually, yeah. And then for us, it's just a matter of executing right now and being able to your point earlier, bridge that sort of chicken and egg gap that exists. And once we're able to get that critical mass, like we're very excited about the way that this is going to be able to sort of take off.
For sure, for sure. Now tell me a little bit about the process of getting incubated by correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Y Combinator, you guys are you guys going through that right now? Is it something you've
We're not
applied
doing Y
for?
Combinator. No, we're not doing Y Combinator. We'd been in touch with them. They'd reach out to us about submitting an application. We ended up, for various reasons, like it's not going to go in that direction, but it is something that we'll consider in the future for sure.
Okay, I thought you guys had been incubated or were looking at being
Well,
incubated. I mean, that would be something, right? So it's all being
yeah,
bootstrapped. Tell me something,
it's
because you
all,
mentioned earlier how, because you guys went out and got feedback early on, you've been able to essentially adapt your model quite significantly. I totally remember for being with an early stage startup, what you start with as a concept originally, as you get feedback from the market, rapidly evolves into something else. I'm curious to know, what would you say is the biggest thing that you guys are doing or focusing on currently that is different from what you guys had in mind when you first started, that has
yeah,
come as a result of market feedback?
yeah. I mean, for sure. So, I mean, it's always like what you first like see when you get into market, right? Like your first insight is always sort of half baked, right? Like you're sort of half attuned to the problem, but not fully on it, right? When we first began ideating around what we were going to build, we saw that people were sharing homes within their companies. So we're like, okay, let's replicate that expense. We were calling it intra-company home rentals. You're going to rent homes to your colleagues and to your colleagues only, right? As was sort of the case today on the market. As we began talking to people, like it became more and more clear to us that, you know, someone who works at BCG, let's say, and I keep coming back to BCG just because how prominent they are in our own development, but like just because someone works at BCG doesn't actually mean they would exclusively want to list someone who is at BCG, right? There are other consulting firms that are similarly positioned in the market to them. There are other tech companies, for instance, that end up recruiting a lot of their people as alumni, companies that they recognize. And so we realized that we were sort of able to broaden the scope of who we were going out to substantially from just, you know, renting to your own company. And so, and that's one of the reasons why, like I'd mentioned earlier, it's so critical to just like start talking to people as early as possible, put something out on the market. Like I'd mentioned Peter Thiel as one of my inspirations in the world of
Great book,
entrepreneurship.
0 to 1. That's
Yeah.
an amazing book.
But when they started PayPal, right? Like unbelievably successful company. Like when they started PayPal, the initial insight for them was, I don't know if you know this, like beaming money through lasers on Palm Pilots. Like the stupidest idea that you could really ever come up with, right? But because they went to market, because they began to build what they had in mind, they were able to collect feedback on it until eventually that process brought them to the point of like what PayPal ultimately became, which was sending contacts money through email, right? And so for us, it was a matter of like we started with this idea. We thought there was a kernel of insight there, intra-company home rentals, renting homes to the colleagues at the company you work at. And from there, we were able to continue having these conversations that actually like were really accretive and like broadened the scope of what we were building to the point where it was like professional home rentals, vet your tenant on the basis of their place of employment broadly.
Mm.
Like in the spirit of the question, like you never get there without doing that feedback, learning from the market, and actually like starting. So yeah, we've come a long way.
Definitely. No, that's awesome. Now, I'm curious to know, and you mentioned Steve Jobs, you mentioned Peter Thiel. I'm sure you must have done some research as well on the story of Airbnb, right? And how it came about. What
Yeah,
would you say is something when you look, let's say, at the founding story of, say, Airbnb, a company that has a similar, not the same crowd that they're targeting, but the
yeah,
marketplace model, right? What are other things that you guys are trying to do perhaps differently, or maybe things that you have taken away from studying their story that you
yeah,
actually are like, oh, you know what, those are pieces of information that I'm actually going to be, applying or
yeah.
have been able to apply. I'm curious to know if there are things from that research you've done from Airbnb story that you're trying to either replicate or avoid.
Yeah, I mean, so Airbnb is obviously a company that I've studied very closely. Brian Chesky, in particular, CEO and founder, is a remarkable entrepreneur and like someone that I've learned a lot from as I've studied their development. I'll tell you one thing that I've come to appreciate from their story that has inspired, like, is part of the inspiration to do things differently. And I'll tell you one thing that I learned from them that we're
Mhm.
thinking actively about implementing, incorporating into our own growth as a
Sure.
company. So first of all, the thing that we want to do differently, and this sort of comes to the core of what we're doing at Matcha. So Airbnb has, as they've developed, is today like not seen as a place where you're going to find trusted tenants. It's actually, understood to be a platform where you're going to get a mixed bag and you don't really know who it is that you're going to get, right?
Hmm.
If you read their story closely, it wasn't always like that. In the early days, it was really something that was being marketed to a crowd of early adopters who really bought into their mission, belong everywhere, sort of like travel and share these amazing experiences with hosts who will receive you and You can sleep on an air mattress at their house. That's where Airbnb comes from. And they'll show you around. And, you have this high trust community. What unfortunately happens over time, and it's like there's an economics principle, like the tragedy of the commons, that Airbnb was very much subject to, is what happens over time is once people sort of recognize that there is something of value embedded in this network, a high level of trust to be able to stay at people's homes. People who aren't as committed and devoted to the mission that you're working to building towards are going to come in and cannibalize that trust. And so what happened over time with Airbnb is you began to hear horror stories of people going to the homes and throwing parties and stealing artwork and this and that, and gradually sort of corroding the trust that existed within that space.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that that happens naturally is because the incentives sort of push the company in that direction, right? You as a company, as a venture-backed company, are committed to growth, right? You have to continue to grow this business for an extended period of time such that you can generate returns for the investors who you have. What that's going to do is it means that you are not going to be overly discerning on who you are allowing into that marketplace, right? So they've sort of worked to mediate that type of concern with the starring system, which, as we discussed earlier, isn't necessarily the most high fidelity way to vet tenants. But you're going to push towards a point where you now have a large mass of people, and you don't really know if you can trust any of the people who are in your network. And that's why, you have companies like Matcha who are now coming back to the original mission of Airbnb, a trusted environment where you can rent homes to people, and sort of working to crack that code of like, how can you make this possible? Mm-hmm. And so we've thought a lot about this as we've refined our own thesis of what we're building. And what we've come to recognize is that we have, to our advantage, a inbuilt mechanism for vetting the people who come on to our platform. Because unlike Airbnb, where every additional tenant who comes onto your platform, right, where you're incentivized to bring on every like marginal tenant to increase volume to your platform and increase revenue, we have sort of offloaded the vetting process to companies for whom every additional person who you bring on brings cost, right? It costs money for me to hire extra people. And so I'm going to be very judicious about who I bring into my company. Mm-hmm. And so we can sort of have the best of both worlds where, like Airbnb, we can go to the market and say, come on our platform, list your homes, work to book stays. However, the hosts are going to be looking at your place of employment to vet whether or not you're the type of tenant who they want. And these companies are super judicious about who they decide to bring into their organizations. And so you can recruit as many people as possible while also ensuring that you're maintaining a high caliber tenant for the people who are going to exercise that degree of control over who they're bringing in.
Got it. Wow. No, that's interesting. And how do you think, because at some point, I don't know if you guys have started thinking about, and then we're going to go into what's something that you're actually wanting to copy. Yeah. But just on this note, just want to know specifically with what you're saying. So you're saying, okay, so Airbnb, they raise capital, and therefore, because their investors are expecting a return, they wanted to add as many guests as possible on their marketplace, which made it so that the incentives were not aligned, and they kind of were accepting anything and anyone. Whereas in your case, because of the way you're getting the guests in the first place, it's not even your responsibility to do most of the vetting. You're passing it on to the company that decided to hire them in the first place. But how are you going to deal with, once you guys decide to raise funds, if it's a conversation you guys are having already? How are you going to deal with that pressure, or how do you anticipate dealing with that pressure to grow? What's your thinking around that, and have you guys already started thinking about raising funds as well?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so this is something that will be necessary at a certain point, and we are actively thinking about um the triggers that we'll need to see in our own business to take that next step and raise capital. So it is something that's an active and ongoing conversation amongst ourselves. It's as any business, right? Like you like the onus is on you to reward the investment that investors are making in you to return them capital, return their funds, have great returns for their LPs and whatnot. And so I'm not saying this as though it's like not a positive thing in any way whatsoever. But it's just important to make sure as a company that you sort of set those guardrails from an early stage such that when the capital is brought in, you can sort of design your growth in a way that will allow you to sort of preserve the mission that you're setting out to accomplish, right? Because the mechanism of vetting tenants based on their place of employment is so core to what we're doing, like that there's an understanding that this is what we're building from day one, right? And so the choice to invest is the choice to invest in the mechanism that we have built as much as anything else. And so that's sort of the protection for us, right? And the hope is that as this thing continues to scale and as people exercise the degree of control that they see fit over the types of tenants that they're bringing into their homes, you're able to sort of scale the thing in a way that gives everyone what they need out of it. Because not every host is going to be as judicious about who they're allowing into their home, right? So if you're someone who's super particular, because we give you control, you can bring in someone that meets those very stringent criteria. And if you're someone who's very liberal, as we discussed earlier, you're probably able to attract a higher price because you're getting a better market. You can lower the degree, or maybe you even list your place publicly, right? You allow anyone to see it. And so for us, it's just a matter of giving people that added degree of control and flexibility. And if investors buy into that vision, and if we're able to grow to the market size that we are anticipating is there for something like this, then everyone comes out ahead. Tenants get the types of accommodations they're looking for, hosts get the type of tenants that they're looking for, and investors get unbelievable returns on their investment.
I love it. I love it. What is something you want to replicate and you actually want to copy from Airbnb's story and Brian Chesky?
So one of the things that Airbnb did remarkably well in the early days was that they were able to figure out a way to integrate their user experience with existing places that consumers were already going for their home rental needs, like very seamlessly, right? And so one of the tactics that they had that was most impactful for them at an early stage was that when someone would list their home on Airbnb, it would automatically get shared to Craigslist. Craigslist was the place where people were congregating for home rentals, couch surfing, whatever it was. And so what we think about actively is how can we integrate our experience with the places that people are going today to share their homes. And so, as I mentioned earlier, going within Slack channels, emails, communication channels, and we're in the very early infancy of this initiative. They're going to these internal communications channels to market their homes today. And so what we're working towards is having functionality where when you list your home on Matcha, if you work at Company X can integrate a Matcha Slack bot into the communications channel where they're currently doing these home rentals today. And then rather than only needing to post there, like rather than going to share it in the Slack channel and then potentially going elsewhere to also share it, we want to make it super seamless so that you can go share your place on Matcha. If I work at Company X, I can also share my place within the Company X Slack channel with a push of a button and our Matcha Slack bot. And so you get the best of both worlds. You could share it to your current colleagues, and you also get access to the entire Matcha marketplace. But these types of initiatives of like needing to reduce friction as little as possible and meet people where they're at currently, These are the types of things that really animate our thinking around go-to-market in the early
Love it.
stages.
Love it. Tell me a little bit more about your applications or use cases for AI and how you guys are implementing AI into your product.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so AI is going to be, and this is not a hot take by any means, right? But AI is going to be increasingly implemented into applications that we're using, like across like all kinds of different use cases, right? This is not by any means controversial, what I'm saying. So one of the things that we were thinking about is what can we do with AI to make our user experience more seamless, reduce friction. To my point before about the Matcha Slack bot, reduce friction to make it easier for people to come onto our platform and benefit from the types of tenants that are available. And so one of the things that we designed and launched to like a lot of excitement from the marketplace was our Matcha AI functionality. And so the way Matcha AI works is that like today, if you go on Airbnb, for instance, and you work through the user experience for listing a home, it's a long form. Like it can take you, I don't know, anywhere between like 20 to 30 minutes to get your home up, which for a platform in its early stages like our own is a massive hurdle for people. What you could do with Matcha AI is we provide like a GPT integration. You enter the most salient points into a text box about your home, things that are top of mind for you, number of homes, location, whatever it is, and they'll defer for different hosts. And then we automatically generate you a pre-filled form based on the information that you provided us that you then just have to go through and do a second pass up to make sure that everything checks out. And then you can submit it. So we've been able to take the amount of time it actually takes to create a listing all the way down to like 2 to 3 minutes, which makes it super convenient for people who are considering using our marketplace to give it a first shot. And it's cool. Like, I mean, it will go as far as to infer the square footage of your home based on things like the number of rooms and the city in which your place is located. But yeah, the name of the game is really like leverage AI to reduce friction and enhance the user experience as much as possible.
I love it. I love it. Now, when it comes to making the onboarding process fast, in terms of making the onboarding process as fast as possible, I think there's a balance between because at the end of the day, you also want accurate listings that share enough information with the potential tenants. So I'm curious to know, like, let's say in terms of the amenities, how are you solving for that? If you're saying the person's going to be able to create a listing in 3 minutes, but at the same time there's if you look at the list of amenities that are available on Airbnb, there's a tons of amenities that you would need to select manually. Yes, no, this applies, this doesn't apply.
Yeah.
And actually, when you're looking at a multi-channel distribution system where you have Airbnb, you have VRBO, you have Booking.com, there's different amenities in each channel. So the PMS ends up even having a longer list of amenities. How are you guys solving for that balance between giving enough information to the potential guest, but at the same time trying to make it a fast and seamless onboarding process for the host?
A lot of conversations, right? Like we've come to understand that particularly within the space that we're operating with the types of users that we have, there are certain key features of a place that are absolutely paramount and a large number that are very much secondary, right? So you talk about amenities, for instance. These are things that, for the most part, like our users have expressed that they don't care as much about. It's not to say that it's not something that like you would want to include. Often people do. They see the amenities as bringing a lot of value to their place. They're free to add them into, the general description of the home. But I mean, you look at listings that people are sharing within these communications channels, and we've seen a ton of them on places like other professional type groups where people share homes amongst themselves. And the level of description that a company like Airbnb, a platform like Airbnb requires people to input for the purposes of our users is frankly excessive. They have good reasons for doing what they do, but we've come to learn that for our own use case, not as necessary.
Love it. That's super interesting. Yeah, because otherwise, it's hard to make it 2-3 minutes. Well, look,
Well,
Noah, I could hold you here for hours because this has been a very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it a ton. Maybe just to wrap things up, tell us, what can people expect from Matcha.ooo in the coming year, 2024? What's ahead? What are you excited about? And also, where can people connect? Where can people follow? Where can people stay in touch?
yeah. I mean, this year is all about acquiring users, getting this thing to take off organically, such that when people have a certain need, it's able to be met consistently, effectively, giving people great experiences in great homes at great prices and getting hosts great tenants that they wouldn't be able to find elsewhere in the market. We're super excited about delivering that value to our users this year. And so, that's the thing that I'm most excited about. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Instagram at matcha.outofoffice. On LinkedIn, we're matcha. You check me out on LinkedIn. Come connect if you want to talk about matcha at any time. Noah Itovich. And I mean, yeah, it's going to be a very exciting time for us. We have a lot of cool functionality that we're going to be releasing, cool initiatives that are in the pipeline. But most importantly, we are unbelievably excited about delivering our value to the market.
Love it. No, I'm very excited. Thanks so much for staying on and joining the show. I look forward to seeing the growth ahead for you guys, and I look forward to hopefully having you back in the show a year from now, and you can tell us all the stories of what you guys accomplished in 2024.
Dude, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.